Now it's saying preparing to live stream the meeting.
Okay.
Still, it takes a few minutes.
No worries. I'm gonna see if I can move this. I had to pop the little box out. I'll put it in the corner.
And now I'm going to admit all.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brett Sears from the consulting firm WSP. We've been working with the city on this transportation master plan. We're just letting people into the meeting, and the city will start off with a brief introduction in just a few moments. Thanks for joining us tonight. Looks like we have everyone in from the waiting room, Brian, and I think Steve can monitor that and let others as they arrive.
Great, thanks, Brett. And hey, hi everybody, and thank you very much for taking time out of your undoubtedly busy schedules to attend the public open house tonight for the city's transportation master plan. We really appreciate your attendance, and we believe that what you'll see, the presentation you'll see tonight, will run through, be led by Brett Sears. We'll outline what the city has been doing over the past couple of years and where we're at now. So this is the second round of public consultation and the final round, actually, of public consultation, where we will be showing our proposed recommendations coming out of the plan. So just as a bit of history for those of you who don't know or weren't around, this particular project started in the summer of 2017. It's been about 55 years since the last time the city has done one of these plans, so it's well overdue. It's timely that we do this. It's also, I think, and you'll find that coming out of this, it's timely that this is coming out in the middle of this sort of unprecedented COVID time, because there's a lot of things in the world, obviously, that have changed, and that includes our modes of transportation and the way we've been looking at our cities and how we get around. So I think that this plan will show that the city is well positioned moving forward, and with what we're going to be presenting tonight. So again, thank you very much for showing up. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Brett Sears, who is our consultant project manager from WSP. He's been leading the project since it started, and he will be going through the presentation tonight, followed by a question and answer period afterwards. So thank you very much. Brett, go ahead.
Thank you, Brian, and good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be here from my humble unfinished basement in Markham, but that's just a wonder of technology that we're able to meet this way tonight, and I'm glad that you're able to join us. I'm joined by my colleague, Sandy Yang, who also lives in Markham. And I'm going to go through the presentation in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to take about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, to present some information. And then we'll be happy to have a dialogue with you and answer questions. You can ask questions in different ways. Probably the easiest way might be if you hovered on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a chat, right? At least in my screen, it's right in the middle on the bottom with a little bubble, kind of like someone talking. Steve had sent one out earlier to everyone, just announcing that the meeting was beginning at 7. So you're welcome to type in questions there if you'd like. Once I'm done with the presentation, if you're comfortable, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question that way. There also are some functionalities. If you go to the participant icon at the bottom of your screen, and if you were to expand that, you can see that there is an icon to to provide different comments or to raise your hand if you want to be. We can call on people who have raised their hand or indicated that they'd like to speak. When we do get to the end, we would love your questions. We'd ask, it'd be most useful for us if they're based on the slides that are being presented, the material being presented, and we enjoy that dialogue. This is being shown live on YouTube, so you'd be able to watch it as well. And the slides that are presented tonight will be available on the city's Engage St. Catharines website, and we have that website on the one of the final pages of this presentation. So you'll see that if you're not aware of it at the moment. With that introduction, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we will begin the presentation in earnest. And maybe if Sandy could give me the thumbs up that she sees that. All right. We've pretty much done our welcome, but we'll talk a little bit about the purpose and overview of the Transportation Master Plan. We will look to the vision and foundation. What is the plan built on? And you'll find it's built on this concept of complete streets. I'll define that concept in a few slides if you're not aware of it, but this is really the foundational building block for this plan, and we're excited about that. We'll talk about some specific recommendations, and you'll see that those go through the different modes of travel. And then also an implementation plan. We have a number of recommendations, but they can't all be implemented overnight. So we're trying to group them into short, medium, and long-term timeframes to have a phased approach to implementation. Then I'll just say what the next steps are for the project, and then we'll be into a question and answer period. So in the next 30 minutes, I'll review the work that we've completed to date and inform you about the process and how we came up with these recommendations, because we want your feedback on the recommendations. We've been meeting with different groups. We've met with some technical agencies like Niagara Region, Ministry of Transportation. We had a training workshop with your counselors, and thank you. We have at least one counselor joining us here tonight so far. So we have been consulting already. We have another meeting planned for next week, and we're using that Engage STC website as well to reach out. So we're looking for feedback tonight and in other means. And like I said, I'll tell you what the next steps are. We think it's important at the beginning of a presentation to kind of frame like, what is a transportation master plan, and also what is it not, just so we're all on the same looking at this from the same perspective. So this transportation master plan is multimodal. And by that, I mean, it's talking about how do we walk, cycle, transit, cars and trucks. We're trying to address all of modes of transportation. It's a living document that we hope will be nimble. We've designed it to be nimble to respond to different items that come up because we're trying to have a long-term vision and use this as a community building asset. So we hope you'll see that this will add value to your community and to provide some guidance for next steps and to make this specific for St. Catharines. We're not, even though we're talking transportation, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. So Niagara Region already has done some good work. The city has already done some good work. And we're looking at both city, regional, provincial, federal policy documents to make sure that we're conforming with those. What a TMP does not do is address very specific localized issues, traffic calming on a particular street, or traffic impacts of small scale developments. There's no detailed design here tonight. Some of these projects hopefully will be implemented, but this is not a blank check to warm up the bulldozer. This does not bypass or fulfill all requirements necessarily for municipal class environmental assessment studies for major transportation improvements. We're setting the groundwork here, but there are future steps that also have to be taken depending on which type of project is being implemented. Brian gave you a little bit of a background in terms of the process and just the road that we've been on, beginning several years ago with the project implementation. We did have a round of consultation in November of 2017. We've met with different committees, advisory committees from the city. Also was at a Brock University orientation week with some of our staff, talking to the university students as they waited in lines to get their different ID cards and whatnot. So we were able to get some perspective from them as well. We have come up with some draft recommendations, and this presentation is somewhat of an executive summary for the Transportation Master Plan report, so that we will be, after getting the feedback here this month and going into the new year, coming forward with a draft report for the council's endorsement, consideration and endorsement. I think I've already given away some of this items in terms of we have been engaging in different ways. We used an online tool in the past in 2017 called MetroQuest, where we asked people questions and they were able to use a map and icons on a map to indicate like different areas of concern. And then in-person meetings at the Kiwanis Aquatics Center, at City Hall, Brock University, trying to use different means. And we're happy that we have the technology to meet this way tonight. So some of the things that we heard consistently throughout the different ways that we consulted, you see there's 5 key themes in terms of, can we extend the transit network in terms of where it goes, and then the hours that it operates? Can we improve cyclist safety and the pedestrian connectivity so that people can use walking and cycling as making them more viable ways to travel? And are there ways to reduce vehicular congestion? And all this really is to try to improve the experience for people in this on the street network, to improve safety for all users. And so a real focus of this plan has been to create a strong and sustainable city that can be resilient. And certainly this year we've learned even more how it's important to be resilient. And so we've kind of looked at this from like an age-friendly, community-focused approach on different health indicators. The one I'll just focus on for a moment is mental health. When I worked in the office, I would bike to work, and I just saw it as a great way to start and end the day. It really helped me clear my mind, and I could really see a benefit to my physical well-being and my mental well-being from having that 35-minute commute on a bike each way most days of the week. So to build this TMP, the Transportation Master Plan, we're looking at things that we know, and we're trying to look at things that we're anticipating. Well, we already know that there is climate change here, but we want to anticipate how is that. We want to make sure that this plan is going to be part of the solution and not add to the problem. And that's where we're looking at urban density versus sprawl. We know that the population is aging. And we're also thinking about things like, well, how does improvements in technology going to affect how people travel? So how do we think about automated or electric vehicles? How is that part of the equation? So we came up with a vision statement that we had spoke about at our first meeting back in 2017, that St. Catharines is looking to implement a complete streets approach that shifts towards a user-focused system, placing emphasis on the sustainable and strategic movement of people and goods inclusively and efficiently. And so the image right in the middle of your screen, we're seeing like we first focused on the most vulnerable road user, and that is the pedestrian. So then we went from pedestrian to cyclist to then the transit network to the goods movement network. We also are considering the road network for cars, but we wanted to start with the most vulnerable road users. Why have we done this? Well, because our design goals have changed. In the years and the decades after World War II, a common theme in the second half of the 20th century was to design from the middle of the road out. And so you started by making space for cars and trucks, and then any type of pedestrian or cyclist or any other use got whatever was left over. But now in the 21st century, we've changed our thinking, and we're trying to design from the property line in, or the edge of the right of way in. So let's make sure we have adequate facilities for pedestrians, for cyclists, for transit riders. We still need to provide for cars and trucks, but we want to make sure that we're kind of shifting the paradigm to start from the outside and work our way in. And we think this will be more equitable, and will certainly help public health and just travel safety. So we see a lot of benefits to this, and this is the real focus of our plan. I said I would go ahead and define complete streets. So we have a definition on the screen, and it really is an idea that the transportation network is designed for all users and all modes of transportation. Now, it's important to note the word I said, network, so that not each and every single road is going to have transit on it. So we want to make sure there's a network. And if there's not cycling on one particular road for some good reason, is there a parallel route that would be appropriate, or an alternate route that would be appropriate? So we're trying to create a network that is designed for all ages and abilities, and that promotes livability and a healthy lifestyle. Has to be context sensitive to St. Catharines, and it would be for all modes and all people. So we completely tried to rethink the city's streets in terms of, we often categorize those as local, collector, and arterial, but can we be a little bit more specific for the St. Catharines situation? And so we have gone through a process to look at the different city streets to put them in a number of more categories, not just those three catch-all categories, to consider, well, what would a downtown corridor be, or a downtown community street, and how would that differ from industrial collector? So I'll show you an example of these in just a moment, but this is how we're trying to think, how can we shift the way people are thinking about travel and give them options to travel by whatever mode they choose. So sometimes it can be difficult or there's trade-offs in this process. So here's an example. We took just a picture from Google Street View. So you'll like the road gets narrower as we go into the back of the picture, and it's wider here, but hopefully you can understand the point we're trying to make. This is an existing collector road in the southern part of the city. It has one travel lane in each direction, and then parking on one side of the street. There's some landscaping and sidewalks on both sides of the street. There's no specific facility here for cyclists. Would the cyclists feel comfortable traveling in the lane with cars? Well, what would we have to do if we wanted to provide something for cyclists here? And so on this slide here, we're showing, well, we could put, if we reduce the travel lane widths, if we eliminated the on-street parking, we would then have space within the already existing paved surface to put bike lanes in each direction. You still have your sidewalk, you still have the landscaping buffer between the sidewalk and the curb. Now you have bike lanes as well, but the trade-off, all of these have a trade-off, is there's no on-street parking. For an arterial road example, we took a section of Lake Street north of the QEW, where there are 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction. There's some landscaping and then sidewalks on both sides of the street. Once again, in this example, there's no facility for cyclists, and we tried to think, well, how could that be accommodated? And we came up with 2 options. One would be you could use your existing paved width and put bike lanes in both directions. But the trade-off here is that you would lose a travel lane. So instead of having 2 lanes in each direction, you would only have 1 lane in each direction with a center turning lane where there's place to turn. Like, and this picture right here, there's no place to turn, so you wouldn't necessarily have a center turning lane. This is one where you would fit it within your existing paved width. Nothing has to change with the existing street layout here. We would change the lines on the street is all. But if we wanted to keep the 2 travel lanes in each direction, we could put a bike lane above the curb that would separate it from the vehicles completely. But in the trade-off there, we would see some items that would have to be relocated. So utility pole would have to be relocated, and some existing trees would have to be relocated. So these are just a couple of examples of why haven't complete streets been applied to every street already? There are these challenges as we try to fit in all the different uses. But we have gone ahead, and for the different classes of streets, we have come up with a cross section. This will be somewhat small on your screen, but like I said, these will be available probably tomorrow, certainly next week on the city's website. so you can look at them in greater detail. But for each of the St. Catharines specific road classifications, we've come up with a typical cross section. So on a local community street, you'd have one lane in each direction with sidewalks. These are low volume streets. You most likely wouldn't have transit running on it, and you don't necessarily need a cycling facility because the volume is low enough that the cyclist and the vehicle can coexist pretty comfortably. In downtown locations, a downtown corridor or a community street, we're coming up with ideas here in terms of providing for all modes. So you can see like we have bus, cars, cycling, pedestrians. Probably should have said that the exact opposite way because we're starting from the outside and coming in, but we're making sure that we provide for all modes of transportation on a street such as this in a downtown area. Collector roads that are taking from those local roads and taking you out to arterial roads, to the bigger roads, connecting the small to the big collectors. A couple of different examples. One, if a mixed use corridor, so that would be one where you would have some retail stores as well. Some might be strictly residential, but some could have a mix of different uses, providing once again for the different modes of travel, starting from the outside and working our way in. Some streets are in industrial areas, and so we have a collector industrial for that as well. This one, we don't show a specific cycling facility. We would likely be suggesting an alternate route just for the comfort of the cyclists or for everyone involved with the street network here. Arterials. So here are the arterials. We're trying to say, let's provide for all users. Let's start from the outside and go in. So we're not showing any 4-lane cross section here. We're trying to still provide for cars and trucks, but shift the emphasis away from them and think about, do we have adequate facilities for walking, cycling, and transit? And then there are a few, also some rural parts of your city. So we also have a cross section for rural uses, and showing a cycling facility here as a paved shoulder with a buffer, just to provide that added comfort level for someone who is cycling. And so those cross sections were developed looking at a number of different things, and we really wanted to understand the land use. Sometimes that is forgotten, but never should be, so that it's context sensitive for St. Catharines. And we've been working closely with your city staff to make sure that the designations are appropriate for your local context. Yes, and we've also done our technical analysis in terms of the average traffic, what is the posted speed limit, if it's urban or rural, to kind of have a very holistic view to look at all these different factors to identify like what type of a street do we want this to be. Now I'm going to start to get into some of our recommendations. So I'm starting with the active transportation. By that, we primarily mean walking and cycling, but it could be any way you want to travel actively. My high schoolers sometimes rollerblades to school. So that's another active mean. Typically, we're thinking walking and cycling, but it's all of those types of active means. So we looked at what the city already has and what had been identified previously for improvement, looked for missing links to try to connect those missing links or to provide recommendations on how to fill in the missing links. And then eventually we get to like what type of a facility would be appropriate on those links. And then also to prioritize, well, what should we do first? And so we have a number of different facility types and different proposed new kilometers. These are not there today that we would be proposing could be if there were the budget available. And so just to give an example of a signed route, that is simply just a sign, but that is trying to tell me, someone as a cyclist, that this route probably has a lower traffic volume or is more conducive to cycling than another route. A bike lane, the paved shoulder would be in a rural condition typically, where there would be space for the cyclist outside of the travel lane that's paved to make it convenient. Bike lane, you might be familiar with. A buffered bike lane is that bike lane again, but then there is some paint to provide additional space between the vehicular traffic and the cyclist. In Boulevard multi-use trail, it would be above the curb, so to speak, so not on the pavement, the road pavement at all. And your off-road trail might be completely out of the right-of-way. The map is for the entire city, and that's one of the main things I wanted to mention, is that we've tried to look at this citywide, to not just focus on one area, but see how can we make connections across the city to help make walking and cycling, active transportation, a more viable way to get around the city. There were several hot spots that were identified at the beginning of the project, and some of those actually will be addressed by others. Niagara Region has been a partner on this project, and they are already looking at some items, and some of them would also require Ministry of Transportation. You can think of the 3rd Street interchange would be led by Niagara Region if there were to be on the 406 a new interchange at 3rd Street. 12 Mile Creek between Carlton and Grapeview. That would be something that would be led by Niagara Region. Would it be just for walking and cycling? Would it be for all modes of transportation? That's something they could look at. There are some opportunities for grade separation of rail, and there's opportunities to enhance the GO station. But I want to focus on 2 that we have looked at through the Transportation Master Plan, and that is one in the northern part of the city around Fairview Mall, and one in the southern part of the city, Chestnut Street Extension. So I have a couple of slides on each of those. In my site visit in the Fairview Mall area, I saw a very distinct line that had been worn through the grass by people walking or cycling from the northern part of the northern areas of the Fairview Mall area into the YMCA and shopping area. And so we thought, there's already obviously a desire line here. And we had heard that there is congestion, vehicular congestion in this area. Sometimes vehicles are mixed up with the QEW traffic from on Lake Street. So, and we also, having met with St. Catharines Transit Commission, understood that during peak times, it sometimes can be hard to get buses in and out and to maintain their schedules. So in looking at a number of these different things, we are showing as a bubble some type of a potential connection from Scott Street into this area, connecting around the Scott Street at Secord Drive intersection into the northern part of the developed part of this area. Now, already in consulting with others, we've already heard some pushback on this in terms of not desiring a vehicle connection, perhaps a walking and cycling connection formalized, but not necessarily a vehicle connection. So we would love to hear your comments on that as well. That's why we're here. Chestnut Street in the southern part of the city. We had heard from consultation about heavy traffic volume on Glendale Ave, and that there's construction often here, and it seems to take a long time for the construction to be done, and that only exacerbates the traffic. And there was limited east-west connectivity. You have the highway going through here. So how do we get across? The city already owns land between the 2 parts of Chestnut Street, and so through our analysis, we thought, this could be a connection that could be made, and we are recommending it at this time as a connection for all modes of transportation, not just walking and cycling, but that missing link would be connected for all modes of transportation. Also heard comments on this, so we'd love to get your feedback as well if you think this is a good idea. This is for network connectivity to help just circulate the traffic in this area by whatever mode you choose to travel. Goods movement. So the regional roads are designed for goods movement, and the network of the city is already there that provides for goods movement. So we looked at some strategic recommendations to make sure that we're providing for goods movement, because we know it's essential to the economy, but also making sure that there are alternate routes. If there's a lot of trucks on a road, is that the best one for cyclists? Can we have those alternate routes? So we've looked at some high-level recommendations for goods movement. In transit, we looked at the existing conditions, and we were able to analyze the ridership data and then look at some routes that we could offer recommendations on based on like the public feedback and the level of the number of people taking the bus and the different routes that they're running, find ways to increase accessibility and convenience and improve the routing and timing. If I'm not biking to work, I typically would take the bus, and I know like the biggest challenge is I have to transfer. And so it's always important if I can try to time that transfer, because if I miss it by just a minute or two, then it's, for me, it's 20 minutes for the next one to come. And that can get a little bit cold this time of the year, or a lot bit cold. But we have a number of recommendations related to transit, and some of those are to extend select routes. One thing we had heard is that people would like the buses to run later into the evening. And then can we, and also they would like the bus to run more frequently. And so we have seen that there is maybe even a latent demand. If there were funds to run more buses, then there could be even higher ridership, because there are some routes that are doing quite well. And then as a future ready and a longer term initiative, and part of that climate change solution, can we continue a feasibility review of electric and hybrid buses to just help be part of the solution for climate change and environmental sustainability? So, and you can look at this map in further detail later, but we do have different routes that we have made recommendations to, once again, increase the number of buses or extend the time that they are operating, extend the peak period time so that you have that higher level of service, and some slight rerouting options as well. Now, we understand that there is being considered a regionalization of transit, and we're well aware that those discussions are going on. But we also firmly feel that these recommendations that we're making through the Transportation Master Plan would be appropriate regardless who the transit operator was. So we do think that they're useful for St. Catharines Transit Commission, and should regionalization happen, whoever is leading that. I'm almost to the end, and I appreciate your patience. The last few slides are on some study recommendations. Like I said at the beginning, we're not going to be able to do all of this overnight, and there will be additional consultation on select items as well. And so we've come up with short, medium, and long-term implementation schedule. And so like we think like the complete streets, that is our big push through this Transportation Master Plan. So we'd love to see that implemented and reflected in the official plan. And speaking to your Director of Planning, she is well on board with that as well. And she's excited about the way this is going. It's a completely different way of thinking of transportation. We do have the Chestnut Street extension in the short term, and like say the next 5 years. And so you'll see though that there would be additional study and there would be more consultation regarding that to make sure that it's going to meet the needs, that it's going to work the way we expect, and that people want it, and that it's going to meet it's going to be a good decision for the city. Similarly, in the medium term, the Fairview Mall improvements could be studied. And that wouldn't just be constructed overnight either. There would be additional study with additional consultation specific to that to make sure that whatever the final decision is really going to meet the needs of the city. And it's interesting to me, as we do work on a number of these types of plans across Ontario, that in the entire Transportation Master Plan, those are the only 2 streets that we are suggesting some kind of change to. It's as missing links. We're not widening any streets. In fact, we're trying to rethink streets to see, can we reproportion them for different modes and not just for cars? So we'd like your comments on that to see if that kind of fits your vision. Active transportation, that map showed a lot of different lines going all over the city. And so we have our recommendations in short, medium, and long term to try to fill in those missing links. As a cyclist, again, just my own personal experience, is never enjoyable when I'm in a facility and it magically disappears. Maybe you've been in a bike lane and they ran out of space or something, it's gone, but you're not at your destination. So we pride ourselves in no missing links. There could be missing links today, but there's a plan to fill those in. and it will take some time, and there are these trade-offs, and that's why it can take longer than sometimes we might want. But there is now we have here a phased implementation to try to address those missing links and help improve walking and cycling in the city. For transit, here's a couple of routes in particular that we had seen, and I had mentioned, like extending the frequency of the peak hour. I know our office has flexible working times, and so not everyone is 9 to 5, and different people are traveling for different reasons. So we did have some recommendations on the frequency and trying to leverage the GO train station. I like how the city already has signs up that show, go this way, it's this many minute walk to get to the downtown. And we think that can be leveraged with some type of a GO station shuttle. So a number of different recommendations for transit. The goods movement, you have the network in place already. So we are just recommending some policy items. One item that's already gotten some feedback, and I would love to hear from people tonight, is a recommendation to permit trucks on the Welland Canals Parkway from Glendale to Eastchester. Glendale and Eastchester are 2 regional roads. There's demand to get across the Welland Canal, and sometimes trucks are on that road. And so we thought it could be appropriate to designate that as a truck route. And we'd love to hear your comments. We've heard some saying not a good idea, too many residential in that area, but there's always these trade-offs, right? If they don't use that road, what road will they use to go north-south in that area? And maybe is the Welland Canals Parkway a better suited, or is there other alternatives? And so certainly as a starting today and going into the medium term, the goods movement sector is going to be changing. With the pandemic, we see already people were moving to online shopping, and I think that's even more so right now. I know my parents have already sent their grandchildren some items that they bought online, and so there will be goods movement bringing those to put under our tree. The next steps in our process here, we want to, I'll stop and after one more slide and have a dialogue with you. We're going to be summarizing the process and the input received. We've had several 2 meetings already before this. We're having another one with another stakeholder group on Monday night. And we have this Engage St. Catharines website that we are looking for feedback, because this feedback is going to help us refine the recommendations in the plan, so that we can prepare this plan to go to your council so that they can review and eventually endorse it. This has been done under the environmental assessment process for master plans. So there is a 30-day public review period after the council endorses the report for release. There will be a 30-day public review period, and you can read each and every word. As it stands right now, this presentation is somewhat of an executive summary, and based on your feedback, we'll be refining that into the final document and reflecting that in the final document. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop. In just one moment, I wanted to highlight the Engage St. Catharines website. That is a great way for us to get your comments. It's because if you type it in there, we don't have to try to read anyone's handwriting, or it'll be all documented, and we'll be able to consider that and then respond accordingly. So thank you for listening tonight. And through myself, Brian, we have a couple of other city staff and one of my colleagues. We would be happy to answer some questions at this time.
Brett, it's Steve here.
Yes.
Being a bit of a novice at Zoom, I've had some messages, but they're coming directly to me and not necessarily to the group. And I don't know if that's intentional. So I'm just going to cover some of the information that's been sent to me. Okay,
great.
Someone goes, I'm concerned with COVID and bus use has gone down and care should be taken not to cut service or less people will use it. I know we've talked about COVID specifically with transit, if you just wanted to speak to that.
Yes, and so certainly across North America and probably the world, we've seen a reduction of people using transit. Like I said, I take transit some of the time myself. I haven't taken it since March. But I don't believe that COVID is here forever. And we think if we do nothing on transit in 5 years, we're going to be regretting it. I don't know when the numbers are going to go back up, if hopefully in 2021, but certainly I would think by 2022, 2023, those numbers will be there. And so we do think that transit is an integral part of the transportation system. So we do think we should still be planning for transit, and we believe that it will continue to be an integral part of the transportation system moving forward.
The second part, and Brian, you might be a better one to address this. Sort of what's sort of going on with the GO train in the Western Hill neighborhood around it.
So the question is, what's going on with it?
Just someone said, yeah, what's going on with the GO train in the Western Hill neighborhood around it? So maybe a bit of an overview of and where we're going with it.
Sure. So the area around the GO station is actually Niagara Region's leading several projects there. One of them is the reimagination and rebuilding of the station itself. There's also some work that's going to be done on the St. Paul West Bridge there. And there's also going to be a new road that's going to be constructed from Ridley Road into the GO station site itself. So all of these projects are currently under certain levels of planning. Obviously, none of them are shovels in the ground at this point. We're working collectively with Niagara Region and the Metrolinx to some point to make sure that all of these projects are moving forward in a timely manner. As far as we understand, the intention is that GO trains will remain and will increase over time to St. Catharines and through to Niagara Falls. And so that's going to be an integral area over there. Part of the new site design is also going to include a bit of a transit hub. So transits between GO Transit buses and St. Catharines or Niagara Region transit buses will be able to meet up there as well. So that site, again, there'll be more coming out at I would think in the not too distant future, but at this time it's still in the planning phases, but they're still very much alive.
Okay, one comment regarding transit is direct route evenings and weekends to the Kiwanis Center. They noted there's plenty of parking there, but not good transit at that time. Question, does the master plan make recommendations for the official plan to intensify lands along bus corridors?
The master plan doesn't make specific recommendations regarding land use, but it does help to support items like intensification of land uses along bus corridors. Going back to the cross sections, you'll note that we are trying to make sure that we are providing space for that. To not even show any 4-lane road, like the most that we were showing on the cross sections were 3 lanes, so that we can make sure we have space for walking and cycling and also for transit. So indirectly, we would be supporting that, and certainly we support it in principle, but we haven't necessarily made a recommendation to intensify land use through the transportation master plan.
And a comment suggestion, I'd like to suggest including recommendations for the zoning bylaw to require bicycle parking and lockers could complement the network improvements in addition to the network improvements. I believe the zoning bylaw does have a bicycle parking component. The challenge with lockers is we're limited through the zoning bylaw. It's basically external. It doesn't necessarily get into internal development. That's more building code.
And there are recommendations in the TMP that weren't as part of this. Again, this is, as Brett said, a high-level sort of executive summary. In the more detailed document, it does speak to encouraging the provision of parking for bicycles specifically, because we, of course, understanding that, creating complete streets and creating a network that is more conducive to use by these modes, that the other places, when you get to wherever it is you're going, what do you do with your bicycle? It's very easy to find a parking spot at Fairview Mall or at the Penn Center to park your car, but putting your bike somewhere isn't always quite as easy. So definitely that the TMP encourages that type of stuff, and our planning section is very much in tune with that. And as we said, moving forward, the TMP, the OP, and the zoning bylaw all complement each other. So there will be recommendations and policy that comes out of the TMP that will also speak and inform those documents. So they are all living documents. They all are constantly being reviewed. And so coming out of this project, depending on what gets approved through council, there will be items that will come forward out of this and inform those documents.
Question, has there been any thought about speed reduction mechanisms?
The complete streets approach is in our mind a speed reduction mechanism in and of itself, in that we are, in order to provide for some of the other modes of transportation, we have to take a close look at, say, lane widths. And in some examples, when I was showing those like before and after photos, we have to reduce the lane width in order to accommodate other modes of transportation. So that the lane width will have a effect on people's speed. If you're on the QEW, those are probably 3.7 meters wide, and you can go a lot faster than on a local road. And so we do not have anything specific to traffic calming or traffic calming devices like your typical speed hump or things like that in the TMP, but this whole complete streets approach is designed as a moderating type of way to help moderate the way people travel, and part of that is the speed as well.
Okay, I have somebody who has their hand up.
Yes.
Alex.
Hi. First off, thank you all for doing this. You know, we haven't had a transportation master plan in literally decades, so it's about time. There's one, I really love what you guys have done, but there's one thing that's really confusing me here. In the street cross-section designs for downtown, and actually for a lot of the designs, you had bollards or some other sort of physical protection for bike lanes. But in your discussion of network recommendations, the closest thing you had was the buffered bike lane, and you only brought up paint. So I'm curious, do you intend for there to be physical separation or just paint on buffered bike lanes?
I'll start, and maybe someone from the city might respond if they like. So we haven't done a detailed design for those facilities, and so it could be either, I guess. It could be either. For myself, the paint is enough, but for me, I've been biking to work for 7 or 8 years, and so I'm used to it. So that doesn't work for everyone, and so the bollards is one approach to help improve the comfort level of people. There's a lot of benefits to it. This time of the year, they probably would be uninstalled for winter, and then they'd have to be reinstalled in the spring. So that's a trade-off. But I would say it could be either approach, and it would probably be on a case-by-case basis. I don't know, Brian, if you want to reply to any of that or at all.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you pretty much nailed it, Brett. There's really it would be taken in context. So there's some areas where, you know, the physical separation, whether it's through just the paint or with with bollards, may or may not be appropriate. Yeah, and I can think of several of our roads, the higher order, like say, for example, Linwell Road, if you're familiar with it, has painted bike lanes. The traffic volume is also quite high it's an arterial road. That being said, it's residential driveway after residential driveway. So in order to put the bollards in place, they really have to be spaced so that they don't interfere with residential driveway with access. So you end up getting them very inconsistently placed down the road. And in that case, they really don't serve much of a purpose. In other areas in a different context, it might work quite well. So essentially what we're saying is that we're open to looking at both. We want to implement what is most reasonable and what we think is going to satisfy, you know, several different. The other bit is the maintenance bit. So there are trade-offs. We're actually going to be one of our city councilors has asked us to try and work with the region to pilot a couple of locations in the spring using bollards as a form of separation. So, long answer short is we're definitely open to it, but it would be context sensitive.
Right. Yeah, I mean, paint really, I would like to ask, obviously it's not always, like you said, it's context sensitive, but on any street which has a speed limit faster than 30 kilometers an hour, there should be some sort of physical separation. Like Brett said, you know, I'm also like, I'm a student, so I'm very comfortable cycling in dangerous situations, although it's probably not a good idea. There's the people like my grandma that should be cycling out there, or my niece, you know, people who are 8, 9 years old biking to school. You would not trust them on a street like Lake or Geneva or Welland, any of the arterial roads really, without physical separation. It's just too dangerous and also not comfortable for them. So I mean, obviously it's maybe a little bit, maybe not there yet to get to the 30 kilometer an hour moment, but I'd really like for us to work there. Otherwise, I really love the work you guys have done. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
We have a couple pedestrian cycling related questions with respect to conflicts at intersections. But the first one is, I'm concerned about streets like Ontario Street where multiple commercial driveways cross the sidewalk and endanger pedestrians. Do you have any ideas how to make it very clear to vehicles to look both ways before driving over the sidewalk? That one's tough.
Maybe I could start with a high level response, and then if the city wanted to jump in. One thing that we haven't looked at a whole lot in the transportation master plan is access management. And so do we need all those driveways? Because we do recognize that that is another conflict point. And sometimes if it's possible, or if land redevelops, the number of access points can be reviewed. Like, does a property have 2 accesses when they only need 1? Now, sometimes they have 2 because the circulation is difficult and you can't get, let's say, a delivery truck in and out the same way. But I think what the question is asking about is access management. And so we certainly want to be wise about that and not provide driveways everywhere. Like, that's kind of showing like who are you prioritizing based on who you're giving access to. But it hasn't been a specific to that street or a specific focus of the transportation master plan.
Yeah, and Brett, just to add to that, the city is actually, Niagara Region is leading an access management policy project. We are participants in it, and we will be adopting probably a lot of their policies and their standards coming out of that. And as Brett said, that is part of it. The other thing that we have begun to do in the last number of years is to ensure that any new sidewalk that goes in or any new driveway that gets redeveloped, the sidewalk actually has to continue through the driveway so that there's physical separation, that the pedestrian zone is delineated better. So it's not that in the old days the sidewalk often ended at the asphalt and the asphalt apron went into the driveway. That doesn't happen anymore. Now the sidewalk is punched through. So those types of things. We also encourage especially on the more busy sites, that the property owners essentially sign and mark before they cross over, to try and, again, keep the message out there that, you know, you got to stop, you got to watch for pedestrians. So it is a tough one. A lot of that has to do with the access coming out of a private driveway. The same happens on the way in as well. That's even a little more difficult to control, but definitely I think we're collectively moving in the right direction and trying to heighten that awareness as best we can. But that, again, isn't specifically covered in the TMP, but there are other complementary studies and policies that are coming forward soon.
So a couple suggestions, recommendations. One is to make sure there is parking for bikes to complement network improvements. The second one is regarding the Fairview Mall, Scott Street connection. I believe proper safe bike lanes would make a lot of sense, but not a road connection, keep it green space. Question, any plans to reduce parking lots specifically in core of the downtown area? They are rampant and largely unused. Do you think some people may dispute that?
Could the city reply to that? We did not look at parking specifically through the transportation master plan.
Yeah, so again, yeah, Brett, to your point, we didn't look at parking specifically in any context, really. The downtown, most of those parking areas are privately owned. The use of those parking areas and the permissions on which they can be created are dealt with through through the zoning bylaw and through in the official plan ultimately. Although cars park on them, they're not typically something that is dealt with through a transportation master plan.
I'm just going to add one piece to that. We are not necessarily in the downtown, but we are working with the planning department. We've done it in the past to look at certain land uses, like commercial land uses, to come up with a St. Catharines parking standard. And we've already in one iteration greatly reduced the number of required spaces because generally we grossly oversupply parking at a lot of our developments.
I have a comment that came to me. The plan seems to focus mainly on cross sections for bike facilities. When I'm riding my bike, I'm most concerned for my safety at intersections. Will goals for improving intersection safety be addressed through the master plan? Does the bike lane category on the AT network map include protected bike lanes? So there's a couple questions there. I'll start
Brett,
maybe. Oh,
I
sorry.
I have one very much related to that.
Okay.
Bike lanes and sidewalks at intersections, drivers making turns tend not to look for cyclists and pedestrians. Besides enforcement, perhaps more signage to make it obvious for drivers to look first. So a lot of conflicts at intersections for cyclists and pedestrians.
Yes, so I would start by saying one of the reasons that the plan seems to focus on cycling facilities is the road network for cars and trucks is already there. We only, in the whole plan, had 2 road-related recommendations. So we think that the city is a mature city. You live in a mature city, and the network is already in good shape, and it tends to meet the needs. At least the city road, the streets that the city operates. So we said, and then there's a big push in terms of climate change and age-friendly to think outside the car. And so that was why we had this complete streets focus, to try to think of walking, cycling, and taking transit, and to make sure that we can kind of balance or bring the pendulum back to closer to a balance between different modes of travel. And so what we saw was that the road network for cars and trucks was there, but there were some missing links for walking and cycling, and some improvements that could be done to transit, should funding be available, that we would recommend. So when safety at intersections, the transportation master plan is looking citywide. So we did show like in the mid-block cross sections, but we haven't shown any intersection designs, and we don't have any in the transportation master plan. I certainly can understand the challenge at intersections, but that would most likely be addressed at an implementation phase when there would be a detailed design. Our firm actually was involved with the lead author to the update of Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18, Cycling Facilities, talks about that in detail. And we would certainly recommend the city to use that as a resource and a reference to accommodate cyclists at intersections, knowing that it has to be, typically it would have to be a case-by-case design.
Yeah, and just to add to that, just recently, actually, I was in discussions with Niagara Region, and starting either this fall, I'm not sure that they're going to actually get it in this fall, but definitely moving into the new year, next season for painting, so spring. We're looking at doing some green bike lanes. So those green bike lanes are put in locations like, for example, at intersections, especially where there's a high potential for conflict between cyclists and vehicles, where the cyclist would have the right of way, for example, crossing a right turn slip lane as you're driving through or riding through the intersection, or across ramps from QEW to from QEW, places like that. So that's one of those things that we're going to start looking to implement in partnership with Niagara Region moving forward. And also too, when we review and rebuild intersections, now we're ensuring that traffic signals or any intersection really, they're made accessible. And oftentimes that includes improved signage, improved pedestrian facilities at the intersection itself, which often lead to heightened awareness. The other thing we've started moving towards, and Niagara Region also has been, is doing the piano bar or the ladder crosswalks, which again tries to heighten that awareness to drivers that this is a place where pedestrians might be, so keep your eyes out. So So yeah, those are more at the operational level, more at the detailed design level. Definitely things that we're moving forward with. Definitely things that some of them are new to the city, and stuff that we're very cognizant of. And we've got a very good partnership working with Niagara Region, and they're embracing a lot of these new moving forward ideas that are in books 15, which is the pedestrian book, and book 18, as Brett said, which is the cycling book that the province has put out.
Brian, there was one last part of the question that came to me I just wanted to address, and that was, does the bike lane category on the AT network map include protected bike lanes? And so I would say the answer is no, if I'm understanding protected bike lane correctly. I had mentioned that the city is mature, and so some of the right-of-ways are narrower. And so we've had to look at what is the existing right-of-way and the existing pavement width. And so sometimes there is not existing pavement width to provide a buffer or protection for the bike lane. It would be just a 1.5 meter bike lane with the white line and then the stencil for that bike lane. If their space allows, then there could be a buffer or bollards or some kind of a protection. And then it also is a matter of the trade-offs, right? In terms of what else is going on that street. Is there, like, what are the lane widths? So probably the lane width wouldn't allow for for a buffered or protected lane, but that's something that would be looked at from a detailed design. I'd mentioned I live in Markham. Markham is, I'd say, a newer community than St. Catharines, or it seems like they have wider rights of way. So here, there might be more space to put in buffers because they built the road too wide to start, in my mind. But in St. Catharines, a lot of your rights of way are narrower, and so it's more challenging. And that's why there are going to be some missing, or you might see missing links today. Not because the city didn't want to do something, but there are all these trade-offs that have to be considered before a decision is made.
Next question, what data was collected that indicated the width of the road will reduce speeds?
We did not collect specific data for this study that the width of the road would reduce speeds, but and maybe Brian, you can jump in to help me on this one. I would say that's the industry best practice, that the width of the lane is directly related to the speed. If it's wide open expanse, people will drive faster than if it's narrower, and the narrow can be actually narrower. It can be a tree canopy that gives a sense of narrower. There's different ways, but I think we didn't do specific study here, but the literature in general shows that a narrower lane width results in lower travel speed.
Yeah, I don't really have anything further to add. That's that's sort of an industry knowledge that the more you narrow a road, the more people, or the less people feel comfortable to drive quickly, the slower they will drive. And really, people drive, especially on your day-to-day route, you drive by feel. You may or may not know what the posted speed limit is. You may or may not know exactly how fast your car is traveling. You're basically driving by what's around you, whether you're being pinched in with pedestrians, if you've got parked cars on the side of the road, if the road is very narrow, as Brett said, if there's a tree canopy hanging over and the road feels enclosed, versus a wide open street like we'll use 3rd Street for example. That's a road. It's rural. It's got it's wide now, especially. It's got painted bike lanes on paved shoulders. It's flat and straight for the most part, and there's nothing really around to if you went off the side of the road that you would even run into. It's signed at 50 kilometers an hour, and we've got data saying that essentially nobody drives 50 kilometers an hour, and so it's very much in the engineering of that street, in the way it's laid out, dictates the higher travel speeds, and vice versa. If you're downtown, you're on St. Paul Street, for example, you've got a relatively narrow road. You've got sidewalks with pedestrians all over it. You instinctively slow your car down. So it's again, there's a lot of literature out there in the traffic engineering world that correlates very well to the more narrow roads, the more narrow lanes, the slower the traffic tends to travel. It's not, not for every driver, but it's for the majority.
Question regarding the proposed recommendation to put trucks on Welland Canals Parkway. Would this come with a widening or realignment at Lock 3 to address curves that may be difficult for trucks to navigate? Concern that put heavy vehicles next to a strictly residential areas and community features such as the Lock 3 complex and the Canal Trail, and would be a detour designated each end since there are no destinations that trucks would be traveling to in this area. Additionally, both Eastchester Industrial Area and Glendale Industrial Area are both well serviced by larger regional roads. What's the rationale behind this since trucks are not permitted on other areas of the road?
So the rationale is sort of twofold. One, it's being used daily by heavy vehicles, trucks with trailers, buses, you name it, they're going up and down that road right now. It is a connection, it's a direct connection between two regional roads and two bridge crossings of the Welland Canal. One of those bridges goes up, trucks make the left turn, the right turn, whatever to get down, that's the only route to get there. There's also no parallel adjacent route to that until you get all the way back to Merritt Street. So once you're down there, there's really nowhere else to go. The road itself, actually that section was just rebuilt or repaved. The lanes are wide enough. They're 3.5 meter wide lanes. There's a bit of an S-bend there by the Lock 3 Museum, but it can handle the large trucks from a geometric standpoint. So that's the and also it's classified as an arterial road. There are no houses that front directly onto the street itself.
It's also a controlled access road.
And it's a controlled access road. Yeah, exactly.
There's one stop that was recently put in.
Yeah, so it's a natural route from between two major regional roads and two major crossings of the canal, especially with respect to how many times a day the bridges may go up and down. And so that's really the thought process behind it. And again, that's why the recommendation is out there. It's and this is the type of feedback we're looking for. That's sort of the explanation behind the rationale for it. But again, we're looking for the community's feedback. So thank you for the question. Hopefully that helps to explain the rationale.
This question, I think we might have touched on it a little bit. Has there been a general discussion around general intersection redesign? How about advanced signals for cyclists so drivers can physically see them before they start driving, sort of like when you have with the pedestrians? And I know we touched a bit on this, but maybe a little bit more detail.
I guess we haven't really looked at intersections in the transportation master plan. We'd be supportive of the items that comment it raised, but we haven't got to that level through this document.
Yeah, again, this document definitely would support those things. That's more of a detailed design or operational decision. It has to do with either signal timing. Also, as we spoke to, Book 18 has items in there such as bike boxes that basically allow a cyclist to get out in front of traffic when to move them out ahead. And so all of those things, again, are things that we're contemplating, we're looking at. They're new in the region. They're used elsewhere in Ontario and in North America with success. The leading pedestrian phase is another similar one that Steve mentioned to get PEDs out there and get them in the line of sight of drivers and give them a head start. So definitely things that we're considering, things that we're open to looking at on a case-by-case basis, but more of an operational or design element as opposed to something that we'd find in the TMP, which is sort of a 30,000 foot document.
Question regarding bicycles. Who sets the rules around bicycles? They support bike lanes and separations. They've seen too many bikes on sidewalks. Unfortunately, they were hit one time, so it makes them a little leery. We get that complaint. I can answer this one. We set the rules with who's permitted. And right now, we don't permit any cyclists on our sidewalks. They're considered vehicles, and when they're on the road, they're covered under the Highway Traffic Act.
I had a couple comments come to me. Less of a question, more of a comment. The distances we have to bike in the city are very reasonable, about 15 minutes. The only issue is safety and comfort. And so that's where the question comes in. The bike lanes made of paint only work for a very small percentage of the population and don't really make anything safer. Bollards and curbs, please. And so certainly the industry is going to greater separation. And I can just think, living here in Markham, they had a collector road with a cycling bike lane, and I see people biking on the sidewalk because it didn't work for them. It was just a bike lane with no bollard, no protection. It didn't work for them. And so as space permits, and then those are the trade-offs that the city will have to go through when they get to the detailed design. How much separation can they provide? You can put everything above the curb, but you might have to relocate trees, utility poles, different things like that. They're just a different trade-offs that have to be considered. And the last comment was love the complete streets and love how we're not widening any roads. And yes, it's refreshing, and we feel it's the right thing to do. And it's certainly the way the industry is going, and we're trying to set up the city for success now and in the future.
A question regarding the connection of Chestnut Street and its potential impact at the intersection at Merritt Street and the potential impacts of the Meriton, if you want to call downtown area, which we've kind of identified as a downtown area in the road classification.
So I could speak to that. So yes, definitely we would expect that there would be some impact. So that project, as Brett noted and is shown in the recommendations, has to go through a municipal class environmental assessment study. So what that will do is we'll look at the entire corridor where the connection would be, and that would include the section basically that would run from Glengarry all the way over to Merritt Street, including the intersection at Merritt. We're also rolling it in with what we had previously shown as more of a streetscaping study, which is also a Class EA of Merritt Street itself from Glendale up to Walnut. So the proposal right now is that all of that would be looked at as one sort of unit, one holistic study, and all the context of connecting and the road through would then be included in that review of the intersection and the review of that downtown Meriton area as well.
That's it for the questions and comments that I've received.
Okay, and and thank you, Alex, for your nice words here and a comment to me. I don't have any other questions that have come specific to me. And I don't see anyone's hand up. People would be welcome if they felt comfortable. Saying one verbally. I might just share my screen for one last second just to put up the website one more time. And there's my email address as well as Brian, and you'll find us on that website as well. If you come up with other thoughts, questions, or ideas after this, please feel free to reach out to us. And you will be able, Steve, this has been recorded so people could watch it again, I take it?
That's correct.
You could watch it again, and the slides will be put on the website as well, say tomorrow or certainly the beginning of next week.
Absolutely. So yeah, thanks, Brett. And I just wanted to thank everybody again for spending the last couple of hours, or this last hour and a bit with us. And thank you for your participation and for the questions and the comments. And as Brett said, we definitely encourage you, if you have the time to look at it in more detail, and if you have any more questions, if you have any more comments, please feel free to send them in. If you could put them in through the Engage STC webpage there, that's great. Otherwise, feel free to, as Brett said, either email myself to Brett or to Steve actually as well. If anybody wanted to have a more detailed conversation before this meeting, Steve offered up his his knowledge, and he's definitely open to getting some phone calls too. And so again, we're open to discussion. If we realize it's a lot of information all at once, and sometimes things come to you after you've had a bit of time to reflect or think on it. So please, if there's anything further, the website will be open for further comment at least until the beginning of January, and maybe slightly thereafter, but at a bare minimum, at least to the beginning of the new year. So so again, thanks very much, and thanks, Steve, for helping us through those questions there. I don't have anything else. If there's anybody else or any more questions came through.
I think we can wish everyone a good evening then. Thank you for participating.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Another version